Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Saving the World podcast with Luke McMichael and Martin Resny. Today, we have a very special guest with us. See if I can get the name right. Nela Kedziorova. Kedziorova. Is that correct?
Kedziorova.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Nela. Our special guest, Nela, is here because she is the winner of the very first ever Saving the World Essay Contest, which we have on our website. If you are curious and learning more about it for next year, it'll be a yearly thing. So she is the winner of the $250 Canadian grand prize. So congratulations to Nela. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the essay that she wrote and kind of try to make some sense of it and have some fun with it. Ask Nela some questions. Martin, do you want to give us your quick take on the essay itself and maybe bring Nela into some discussion?
Well, I think actually the best thing to do first would be for Nela to briefly summarize or introduce what it was that was her point, so that we make sure we don't misrepresent or somehow misread whatever she wrote in the essay.
That's a great point. Nela, we'll turn the floor over to you. How about you just kind of walk us through your essay a little bit and what you were trying to get? So the question is, if you were in charge of everything, what would you do? How would you save the world? And that was kind of the question put out to everybody to write an essay on how they would save the world. So this is Nela's chance to give us a good review on that. What was your essay? But why did you get the idea? And tell us as much as you like.
So hello, I'm really glad I can be here. And in my essay, first I didn't know what to write about, because there are so many things that we actually face and have to solve. But then I came to the conclusion that the first thing ever we can do, we have to do, is to have peace in the world. Because without peace, we cannot achieve anything else. Every problem we should solve is somehow connected to peace. And that's actually the thing I wrote about.
Thank you. That's a great summary. It really comes down to that. And that's definitely something that Martin and I really haven't focused on as much as we should have. We've had a couple of small podcasts about war and how to try to control tyrants and how to try to hold that back. And we definitely had a little bit on the Ukraine war, obviously. But it's something I think definitely needs to be a focus, needs to constantly be the mainstream. And I really liked in your essay how you kind of made the comment that we need to be almost not scared, but we need to be remembrant. We need to remember the horrors of war as much as possible in order to prevent future wars and in order to be disgusted by war, I guess. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking there as far as the disgust of war and how it can actually lead us to better things?
Like how peace can lead us to better things.
Yeah, sure. How do we get peace, I guess? So in your essay, you talked a lot about that. So what's your feeling on that? How do we get peace?
There are like more parts of peace we have to solve. The first one is to keep peace in places when there already peace is. And this may seem easy, but actually it's also a thing we have to care about, because, for example, now when we face energy crisis, inflation, and so on, it is much easier to radicalize people, and then it can also lead to a war. Like before the Second World War, in Germany, people were really frustrated from the Versailles Conference outcomes, and their lives were really bad. Now in Europe, life conditions are also getting worse, and there are many populists who are trying to get some political points on that. And if we let them come to power and rule our states, it can be really dangerous, because then when we are divided, it is easy to that some seeds of hatred come here, and then we can fall into a war again. Then we also have to solve ongoing conflicts. What's probably the most complicated thing, and I'm not a expert on every world conflict, so I cannot list it here. But I think that it's really urgent to think about these possible solutions to cyber wars like in Somalia, Yemen, and so, because they are really, really bad, and many people are suffering. And if we solve them, it could be really good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
If I may, just like to as like my sort of review of the essay, what I especially liked, it's kind of simple, of course, to make an argument for or argument to say that it wouldn't be nice if we had world peace. What I really liked about the essay was that it wasn't a naive conception of peace, specifically peace at all cost. It was Nela, I liked how you mentioned appeasement and made the connection between the current conflict in Ukraine and the annexation of Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia before the Second World War. Could you please explain, because I think this is a very important aspect relevant to current situation about how to keep peace. Could you please explain a little bit what's the problem with, in your view, with the concept of trying to have peace at all costs?
Yeah, the biggest problem actually is that if it's forced peace, it can never last, because actually peace has to be also in minds and in hearts of people. And then when we are just doing everything to keep peace, but we give up on our values and we give up maybe on parts of our lands and so on, then it actually isn't peace anymore, because there's no peace without freedom, and there is no peace without justice. And this is really something what is total against our international system. And yeah, appeasement, I understand, of course, that like Great Britain and so on, France, they were scared after the First World War to have another war. But when they thought that a dictator can be satisfied if they give him just a part of the Czechoslovakia, it was really, it's naive. And the same could happen now when like Russia already annexed some parts of Ukraine yesterday, and today Putin underwrote it. And this is something we can never allow to be recognized widely from the international community, because it would destroy everything we attempted to build after the Second World War.
Yeah, I also really liked how you mentioned, like also to let you explain more of what was the interesting points in your essay. I really like you proposed some sort of a reform of the United Nations. So could you please explain what's your idea there, or like what's the problem currently with how the United Nations are structured in terms of guaranteeing peace in the world?
Yeah, the problem is that the UN actually do not guarantee peace because they cannot act in conflicts in which some of the 5 permanent members, which are China, France, the US, Great Britain, and Russia, have some interests. And then if all these 5 countries, which 2 of them are autocratic, cannot agree on something, then the UN can actually do nothing, because only the Security Council has right to do obligatory actions. And for example, the General Assembly, in which are all states that are UN recognized of the world, then if they say that something should be done, it's really just a recommendation. And if someone doesn't like it, they actually don't have to do it, because there is, they cannot force them to do it. But the UN Security Council actually can. And I think that it should change, because we see that these 5 countries are not the guarants of peace anymore. When Russia invaded Ukraine, this is something the UN never thought could happen, and we all probably never thought could happen. But then if every obligatory action should be authorized by, for example, a constructive majority in the General Assembly, then it would really work better, because, for example, the General Assembly made a resolution about war in Ukraine even more times, and they told like that it should be stopped immediately and such things, but like they cannot force Russia to stop it. So
Yeah. I think that was definitely one of the great points I was going to bring up as well, is the reform of the UN is definitely something we've talked a fair bit about in the past, with trying to somehow make it so that you can't veto good things, you can't veto progress. So reading that in your essay definitely was something really strong to me, something really, really important that I think everyone in the world needs to start thinking about. I was a huge fan of the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That was something that really got me into this in a pretty big way, and made me wanted to really create this website and podcast. But again, I feel like in order to actually implement these 17 goals, they need a little more power, and they can't be, handcuffed by these vetoes of, if one country doesn't want to save the world, then we can't save the world. And so we definitely need to come together with new ideas and new ways to kind of break through that veto power. We've seen it even in just individual countries. So you see it in the States with, the Senate, the Republicans and Democrats completely always trying to block each other out. Whenever somebody wants to do something good, the other side's just constantly trying to hold them back and blame everything on the other side, point the finger, and just basically prevent them from doing anything positive, because they just don't have enough votes. They need maybe a 66% majority, and it's really hard to ever get that to do anything important. So we definitely have to rethink ways to try to get more consensus and some kind of way to bust through these veto powers, particularly where tyrants may be involved, where one person is ruling a whole country and trying to decide the fate of other countries by either attacking them or forcing them, or maybe even buying them out in some ways, and economically forcing them to do things. So that's, I think, was a really, really great part of the essay that kind of highlighted that. So very, very well done.
thank you. Yeah, I also like the SDGs. I have here a bit of them, and yeah.
Yeah, you said you were part of some kind of council or youth council for what was it? What was it called? Was it United Nations?
Unfortunately not, but I've been to UN headquarters in Vienna and voted there.
Excellent.
So yeah.
Oh, it's really exciting. So glad to see you. Nela's only 16 years old. It's really exciting that the youth are able to come up with some great ideas that even old guys like me and Martin sometimes have trouble putting together into words. And she was able to put it in a great essay, very succinctly, and in a way that I hadn't really thought about specifically like that before. And so it was great for me to read that.
Yeah, but that to be fair, I guess in a sort of debating sense, because like big part of my background is in debating competitions, which usually involve high schoolers. And like I said before the show, I was actually quite surprised that somebody with your English level from Czech Republic and able to write an essay like this wasn't really involved, like the whole high school in the debating competition, because that's usually in our country, the people who are capable of that usually are capable of that because they have been involved in a program like this. So instead of the debating spirit, like what would happen if this was a debate or your essay was like an opening statement in a debate, would be to try to probe the ideas and to be like try to be critical of the ideas in order to refine them into their best possible version. So for instance, when you say with the United Nations situation, in the essay that there should be a constructive majority in the United Nations as opposed to the current model of the Security Council with the specific selected countries, then somebody could have a counter argument in terms of trying to figure out how to actually set it up, how to actually do the kind of vote that would be required. So if somebody said, as like a criticism to your idea, that not all countries in the United Nations are equal in terms of their effect on world peace, for instance, you could find many different ways to measure between them, like the power of their military or the number of population that's in the country, or like, you could try to find various sort of objective comparisons between the countries, which could indicate that maybe like a one country, one vote wouldn't necessarily be something that like the most powerful countries would choose to respect in the world anyway. So if you think about it in sort of these terms, like how would you specifically set up in your mind the vote in the United Nations, so that it would be something that realistically in real world, even the more powerful players might feel that they inclined to indulge and be involved in?
I still believe in equality, and even though those important players would may feel like they haven't got the power they deserve, they've actually got their chance to rule the world. Let's say, if we say it like that, because we see that the Security Council doesn't work, then we should maybe try to give the power also to another states. Many of them are new. When the UN was founded, there were just 51 states, and now it's 193. And there's, for example, no permanent member from Africa or South America in the Security Council. And I think that these countries also have important and interesting points of view, and they can contribute to everything the UN does. But now, when they all the time have to think about these 5 powers which have the veto power, then maybe some good solutions cannot be implemented. And if we give equal power to everyone, we also support compromise making, and other countries also have their voice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Definitely.
just a quick follow-up, because I think it was really good. So like I said, I also, before the podcast, I studied political science. So you actually doubled down very effectively on equality as a principle, and I respect that. It's just within the whole context of political science, I think what you would also need to address, I think like you sort of made a very good point against the veto specifically, that sort of veto making anything impossible is not useful at all. And you made a good point for what's called proportional representation within that it should be about, if everybody has equally votes and so everybody has to be involved in the decision, then the decision will be more proportionally representative of what most people in the world actually would want to happen, which is similar to an argument for proportional type of vote or representation in normal political systems. But just one last point sort of to contend with from the side of people who call themselves political realists. I think there's a famous political scientist, Max Weber, and he basically defined power, as in political power, as the monopoly on or the authority to wield violence. So basically saying violence is power. So what would you, as a young egalitarian person who wants to help things in the world, what would you say to the argument that politically violence is power, as some political realists believe?
Actually, it is some kind of power, but not everything can be achieved only through violence. And I believe that working together is, at the end of the day, better for both sides, and that the side that could use the violence can actually achieve more if the side works as the other side, because then there is no loss of resources, and actually also not hate between the people. And I believe that if we work together and cooperate, we achieve more than when we just try to force someone to do something.
Yeah, thank you. You should really consider doing debating. I think you'll be pretty good at it.
I definitely think that the proportional representation concept is a really important one with this. Is, if you kind of tried to break it up votes equal to every million people or every 10 million people, you get one vote or something. You would definitely get a lot more power, you know, in the African and South American countries than they have right now. And even the Asian countries obviously would get a lot more power. And I guess that's the challenge is trying to give too much power to, you know, maybe India and China just because they have so many people. You know, do we let them make all our decisions? Because they would have almost a half the world in those two countries. So it's definitely tricky to try to figure out how to balance it out in a way that's kind of proportional to everyone in the world. But I definitely think there's a lot of progress that can be made from the consensus kind of decision-making process and trying to talk things through and what works for everybody. But you definitely have to find ways to kind of, in some ways, force things through the countries that are holding it up. And that's the challenge I think that we're facing right now with the veto. So it's definitely something we need to consider if we're ever going to create either a brand new UN, maybe based on NATO or something. If Russia loses this war and every country in the world decides to join NATO to prevent it in the future, that would be kind of interesting. Or we'll create a new name for NATO, perhaps some kind of world federation for protection, for defense, world self-defense force, perhaps. That's basically specifically about preventing aggression, preventing war of any kind. Yeah, you can still defend your own countries, and you have still police forces preventing atrocities and tyrants and warlords. But as far as a country attacking another, hopefully we can create a world where that never happens. If we're all disgusted enough and we've all lost friends and family to warfare or have suffered from warfare economically in some way, if not physically, then you know we can all work together to prevent that and avoid those wars in the future, I think.
Yeah, but I think that this may be brand new organization, but I actually believe in the UN. I think that the idea is fine. It's just better done.
Yeah.
And it should really be based on peace and not like based on an opposition to, for example, Russia or China also, because even if we may not like it, they are also part of the international system, and they also have a right to have voice, even when they do, even though they do these things and are not democratic. But creating a organization that would be based on being against something, I don't think could lead to peace.
I remember from your essay, I really like the point about making comparison between Germany and maybe future Russia, or past Germany and future Russia, whereas you said that the past Germany also, they were the enemy, but once they learned their lesson, then everybody accepted them back into the global world system. And Germany now specifically, maybe because of their history, is actually one of the leading pacifist political forces in the world. And now sort of ironically will try to back it up with more military of their own. It's sort of an interesting conundrum. But I've just recently heard, I would recommend, he's called Perun, is on YouTube. And he is doing very good analysis. He's an Australian person, actually. And he's doing analysis of the current conflict, probably the best ones on the internet, in my humble opinion, which is somewhat expert. And I just recently listened to his video about German sort of current situation of like trying to procure more weapons again. And he sort of concluded the whole video with a message to the people of Germany, kinda, is that just because you have a military, that doesn't mean that you have to go on conquering the world again. So I guess is a place for, or a reasoning for having a military as a deterrent, is like showing that if conflict were to happen, it wouldn't go well for the aggressor, but just because you have it, don't have to decide to be an aggressor. And I think Germany is an interesting example of how a country with its culture can turn around 180 degrees. So if you look at the current situation in Russia, what are your thoughts on how you think it's going to go in the near future, probably, possibly?
In Russia, there is a problem that the dictatorship has been like the whole history long there. And then, especially in the last 20 years, the Russians were really under massive propaganda that was anti-Western and that was really fascist, let's say like that. And I believe that for them it would be much harder to get back into the international community than for Germany, because the brainwashing is much bigger than it was by the Germans, because now we have social media and everything is spreading so fast, and they hear it like from everywhere and see it from everywhere. And after such a long time of being taught that that you are like the best in the world and that you are saving everyone else, it's hard. But Germans also went through something like that. Maybe it was not that massive, but they, after the war, they showed that they want to return to the normal world. And if Russia did the same, which I don't know if I believe that they would, we should help them.
Okay, so you mentioned many times now the social media thing, and it was another problem that you mentioned in the essay specifically. So if you think that is one of the main obstacles today in countries like Russia, but presumably many other places in the world, is sort of an obstacle to people being more reasonable and cooperative in the world. Do you have any thoughts on what to do about the social media situation going forward? Some sort of reform or some rules to set up, or really anything that you can think of to make it better?
Yeah, I think that the first thing we should do about social media is to make the algorithms transparent, because when we don't know on which algorithm is based the content we see and how often we see it, and so then it is really hard to change something about it. And I think that if it becomes transparent, then some experts can maybe make some, or like, I'm sorry, I forget about that word.
Yeah.
Have you heard, just in relation to this specifically, because I think what you're describing is a thing that exists and has a name. Have you heard of the open source movement?
I know what's open source, but I know about this movement.
Well, basically, when you say that algorithms should be, you should know what exactly the algorithms are doing, and that all the coding needs to be transparent. Then it's a big part of what open source, as in open source code, movement is about. I've recently stopped working at Red Hat, which has offices in Brno, which is a company that's probably the world's biggest one that produces open source software, which you don't have to pay for the code, because the code is free and available and transparent. And the only way to make money on that is through services related to that software as a company. So there's a whole thing like what you're describing. I just would suggest, if you think that this is a way forward, as another thing maybe you could look into, I think could be interesting for you, as in like how the actual technicalities of like how what you're saying could be done. Is the name of that is open source. But yeah, I think I very much would agree with you on this as a part of the solution, as somebody who has studied media and communication at the university. Also, there usually back when I studied it years ago, it was more like identifying that everything's wrong, and there weren't many solutions of like what anybody could do about it, maybe. And I have a sneaking suspicion that many people with my education have spent the last decade contributing to the problems by working at the companies who are creating the not the obscure algorithms that are doing even different things than the people who created them wanted them to do in the first place. So yeah, once again, then thank you for your ideas, because I think we've covered now basically everything you've mentioned in the essay. Is there anything that we forgot to talk about?
I think we covered a really good chunk of it. One quick comment on the last thing I wanted to throw out there. I just read an article a couple of days ago about Twitter and trying to kind of find ways to control the social media and find more truth, I guess. And they've got this new program called Bird Watchers, where bird watchers are people who are kind of somewhat qualified. They have to go through kind of a week-long process to kind of prove that they're not bots or they're not some kind of paid person to do it. And basically it's up to them to kind of decide which tweets are factual and which are kind of misleading or disinformational. And they can kind of rank them and rate them. And it's pretty similar to what we've talked about in the past, Martin, with our kind of TruthWorks project, where it's just a matter of figuring out what social media is actually, I guess, good or true or beneficial for society in some ways, and trying to kind of at least give some way to let the good stuff get to the top so that you see more of the good, truthful, kind of accurate stuff, and more of the garbage that's just kind of sensational, just trying to get likes or just trying to be crazy and sensational, like Earth is flat and all these other kinds of things that are just kind of ways to get attention. And if you can kind of find ways to kind of bury or just lower the priority a little bit on things that are not proven as easily or things that are less true, let's just say, than some of the well-known, agreed upon normal truths, I guess you could call them. So anyway, I thought that was a pretty interesting thing that Twitter's working on this. They're kind of taking ideas.
That they are working on this. I don't know if it's like the way they make profits, that they through emotional and sensational things that people see there, and they like do something about them and then spend more time on the social media, then I don't think that they really want to do something about this information. And fact checking is on one hand really important, but we should better try to prevent disinformation from even reaching people. And because when someone falls into a hole, then he doesn't accept any facts. So we can show them millions of fact-checking sites and everything, but they would not change their mind because they are brainwashed. So
no.
Yeah, I think what Nela is saying is accurate. I would just point out that there's sort of a different approach that I guess I now consider to be my favorite approach that sadly isn't being talked about as much, and that's trying to use AI against AI, in that somebody's developing apps which are called news disaggregators. Not aggregators, but disaggregators, meaning that it's an app that uses an AI that has an algorithm that is trying to take all the news and then allow you to see the biases in what the kinds of news were shown or weren't shown, and sort of allow you to say, no, just stop the biases and just give me information which is representative in terms of whatever priorities you would set into the app in terms of the distribution of the news sources and stuff. So that with that first step one would allow you to decode in that app what kind of bias there is in a particular source in how they're doing the news, and also to select basically filter the news feed. So I think maybe that's because I think I forgot the specific name, but that's what some of the leading people in AI now are doing or trying to do to help, which I think this would be nice, because this is a tool that people can get, and if they, like you said, would in this way not even receive the bias without understanding that it is bias, then I guess you could prevent new people from being sort of confused about things. It wouldn't help with people who have already been confused. I think there will be other part of the solution needed. And I think also the sort of open source, like showing the code of the algorithms, making it not obscure, is another big part of helping everybody understand what is more or less truthful to begin with, or more biased or less biased, or what even is happening. Because sort of full disclosure, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, I also dabble in things. I guess the best way to introduce it, my bachelor's thesis at the university was about trying to define the genre of conspiracy documentary movies. So I'm very much interested as a scientist, a social scientist, in conspiracy theories and various other ways to confuse people on the internet. I think what I did was trying to disentangle in these kind of documentary movies, like what percentage of them is mystification specifically, or just lying or bad facts specifically, or omission and stuff like that. So if you look at controversial subjects, like which are very interesting to these, for instance, skeptical community, like the people who are supposed to be the arbiters of what are facts are not facts on the internet, like academicians and scientists who make it their basically work to popularize science and like what's factual or not. And you see, if you have subjects like, for instance, astrology, which is very hated by the skeptics and very controversial. And then you look at also what the people on the, let's say, right side, like the skeptics, are doing wrong. In that, like, there's also problems, I believe, in how people who are supposed to be the fact checkers, or the people who are supposed to help people see what is actually reasonable or factual on the internet, have their own biases that are sort of running unchecked and stuff. And that's, I guess, difficult for the community of, like, the skeptical community to even acknowledge. So I also think like the one part of the solution would have to be the skeptical community, or the fact-checking community, being more skeptical of itself, which also includes like the trusted news sources, because that's the whole thing, that the easiest thing in the world for the conspiracy people to say, don't trust the news, everybody's just biased and lying or whatever, so that nobody trusts anything. And in this situation, it's very problematic when some of the trusted sources or the mainstream sources actually are lying and doing bad reporting and stuff. So I think that's also, for me, a big part of the solution. But yeah, I just generally agree with you, which is not ideal, because that's not the best basis for a discussion or a debate. But I guess here we are.
We definitely have to find ways to make truth more profitable. Maybe, you know, find ways to incentivize companies and individuals to just fact check a little more, or even also just make individuals perhaps more open-minded in general to other sides. And you mentioned the hole, and that's a real serious problem in the world, is people kind of get stuck in their holes of facts. And doesn't matter how many facts you bring before them, they'll still believe, you know, the earth is flat, or they'll still believe whatever, that man never landed on the moon, and all these things. They will just believe it no matter how many things you show, or they're stuck. And they like being stuck in some ways. It's their tribe. You know, they'll go to war, they'll die on that battle, some kind of religious warfare, perhaps, over some kind of idea. So I think really the fact that we're talking about it here, and that more and more people, I think, are talking about it, is very good. I think that's one of our main goals, is to just get people talking about these things a little bit more, and get people to be just a little more open to other points of view and other ideas. And I think that's great that you're here, Nela, that you're willing to take some time from your Saturday and share these points of views with the world. I think, you know, if we had a million more Nelas out there, the world would be a much more better place, I think. And that's definitely something we're trying to strive to get more people interested in these kinds of discussions.
Yeah, but for those people who you tell should be maybe more open-minded, I think that they are often maybe with low education and with low incomes, and then maybe those disinformation or conspirational theories promise them some easy world seeing, and promise them then, and they maybe tell them truths that is easier for them to accept than the truth that their lives are maybe bad because of no reason, because they are just bad, and maybe there is no one to blame for that. But it is hard, and even not in some situations, they shouldn't maybe also blame themselves, because maybe their parents, and maybe the parents of the parents, you know, it's like it's hard for someone to accept that there is no one to blame for their bad situation, and then some disinformation tells them that it was, I don't know, Soros or Biden or what else, and they tend to believe that because it is easier than to deal with the real world.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nela. Martin, is there any final comments or questions you'd like to put before we wrap it up for today?
Well, just that the more I see Nela speak, the more I would like to see her at a debating tournament or something. Just so you know, I'm on the board of the Czech Debate Society, and we do plan to again have an international debating tournament hosted next summer, which is called Heart of Europe in Olomouc specifically. So I'm just letting you know. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but based on your essay and on our discussion today, I really think you should try to check it out, because international debating competitions in English are happening once again after the whole coronavirus situation all over the world, and I think it's something you might enjoy.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much again, Nela, for joining us today. We'll continue to spread the message of your essay, the message of peace, as much as we can. That's definitely our main goal with this podcast, is bringing people together. And we can't save the world alone. That was the other great point in your essay, is that no one can do this alone. No one can save the world on their own. And the more people we get together, the more people we get talking and thinking about solutions, the better able we'll be able to push a few good things through and make the world better, one step at a time, one idea at a time. So thank you so much. Hopefully we can connect again some point in the future. Anytime you have any questions or you want to come on and just talk with us about any ideas, or feel free to send us an email anytime. And check out the website, anybody who's watching this, savingtheworldtogether.org, and let us know anytime you want to get involved. And thanks so much for joining us today, Nela. And any final comments that you'd like to put out there, or any final ideas you want to toss out to everybody?
Probably. Oh, fine. I'm really happy I could be here and share some points of view I had on peace. And yeah, I hope that peaceful world comes. And yeah, maybe I will live in it for some years.
It's a great hope to have. Thanks again so much, and let's save the world together.